everyone, this is going to be a hopefully brief video looking at some of the books I picked up over the last couple of months over the holidays, some of the more interesting ones or some of the most recent ones, including the first handful here, which I got yesterday. I work once a week in Osaka, and if I have the time, I can squeeze in a trip to the bookstore on my lunch break, and so I got really lucky yesterday. This is After Yesterday's Crash, the avant-pop anthology edited by Larry McCaffrey. McCaffrey is one of these literary critic, professor, scholarly guys who's done a lot of work in moving forward studies of postmodernism. He's got a handful of interview collections where he interviews these postmodern American writers, and some of the names back here are included there, exploring these bits of American pop culture to create experimental fiction. And I'm looking forward to sort of making my way through this bit by bit. I think some of these pieces I've already read, but this is a really cool collection to have. I found this book, The Dogs, A Modern Bestiary by Rebecca Brown. I do not know a thing about this book, but I saw it was published by City Lights. Sort of a maybe modern dark fairy tale type thing, or using animals as a manifestation of human emotions or something. Not totally sure. I don't really know what to expect. But here's a chapter, Bone, in which is illustrated Charity. Cool, looks really cool. I got this book, The Spell of the Vienna Woods, Inspiration and Influence from Beethoven to Kafka. And it seems to be about different writers and artists who found inspiration from the woods of Vienna, Beethoven, Freud, Kafka. And I think this ties in some autobiographical material too from the writer Paul Hoffman, who had to leave Austria, it says here, fled as a young man when Hitler's army invaded the country. So he's using his recollections of the Vienna woods and supplementing that with the experiences of other famous artists. Just seems like a nice bit of nonfiction, something that might be nice to check out one of these days. This book is Venice Triumphant, The Horizons of a Myth. I'm in sort of a pseudo Venetian mode, I would say. I don't know, I've just been thinking about Venice a lot. And this seems to be a pretty legit history of the city. Elizabeth Crozet-Pavon is a professor, I think, at the Sorbonne, and this was translated from Johns Hopkins University Press. It's a history of Venice from Roman times to the 16th century. It just looks like a great place to start with, looking at Venice. It just piqued my interest, I would say. The last one I got yesterday was The World of Smith Omnibus from P.G. Wodehouse. I dig Wodehouse. I think he's great. I think it's a lot of fun reading his stuff. But I've never read any Smith. I've read a bunch of Worcester and Jeeves. I've read the Lord Emsworth. I've read all of those short stories. And so having this nice collection will be great. My ultimate collector mind. I'm really hoping to get all of those hardcover ones. There's 100 of them in the series, the complete works of Wodehouse and those nice sort of color coordinated hardcovers. I forget who does them at the moment. But until then, this will be a great addition to my library. And this is the bookstore I got all of these books at. This is Tengi Books in Osaka. All right, next a couple newer titles. I got this book, Almond by Won Pyung-son, which is part of this big wave of Korean literature that's been put out in English translation in maybe the last 5 to 10 years. And I think this is a pretty famous, popular bit of this Korean fiction. But it came out in this Nomad Editions, it's almost like a bunko size, the Japanese mass market size. If I compare it to the Wodehouse, it's it's teeny tiny, index card sized. I just thought it was cute, and I'll check it out. This writer, Won Pyung-so, seems like a very interesting, sort of artistic-minded person, and this is her debut novel. I think it's a big bestseller in Japan too, which would explain why I was able to find a copy. So I thought that was neat. I also got the new George Saunders novel Vigil, and unfortunately, I have yet to see like any super positive, glowing reviews of this book. Everyone I follow or see online who's talked about this book has been mid to sub mid on it. They think that the ideas are good, but that the execution doesn't quite match up to the ideas, or something along those lines has been the sort of notes I keep seeing. So I'm waiting to see if anyone really loves this book and really praises it. But I'm gonna read it in any case. Saunders is one of my guys, you know. He's been one of my favorite writers for over 10 years at this point, and you know, I pre-ordered this book the moment I saw it was available. I'm hoping I love it the way I have loved other books of his in the past. I found this old mass market of The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. James is a writer I'm interested in more and more recently, and sometimes I think I just want to like quit whatever I'm reading and just like devote the next however many months to just working through all of James's stuff. Just the way the feeling I had when I was reading his books over the winter holidays, reading some of his shorter stories and novels. I loved it so much. And so I talked in my 2026 goals video that I wanted to read The Wings of the Dove this year. And a very kind commenter mentioned that maybe this book would serve as like a better entry point into James's like larger like masterpieces. This is regarded by most people as being his first true masterpiece. So like, you know, I think I'm gonna follow that advice. I think I'm gonna read this one soon, and hopefully by the end of the year feel more comfortable in James and finish up with The Wings of the Dove later on. I have The World of the Shining Prince by Ivan Morris. Ivan Morris, one of the legends of Japanese scholarship, writing very early on in like the 50s and 60s, I think. When did this book come out? Yeah, this book came out in 1964. And it's about it's about court life in Heian, Japan, this period around about 1,000 years ago. And the Shining Prince here is referring to Prince Genji of the Tale of Genji. His study of this period has been cited by a lot of people as being a really great, like, sort of introduction to this world that is totally like alien to us. Like if you read the Tale of Genji, or if you read anything from Heian, Japan, it seems incredibly alien, the way that people live. And I'm gearing up for like a reread of Genji, probably not this year, but maybe next year. I'm gearing up for it, and this will be something I turn to immediately when I start that project. I picked up this copy of The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki. Tanizaki is one of the sort of modern Japanese literary heavyweights, and this is his biggest and most famous novel. It's also one of the most famous novels of life in Kansai, the sort of greater Osaka, Kyoto, Kobe area. This book's about 4 sisters who are growing up in Osaka and their family, and they have like a second home in Ashiya, which is a neighborhood in between Kobe and Osaka, which still to this day is very filled with well-to-do, like rich people. It deals with a lot of like real events from this area where Tanizaki was living at the time. This book takes place in like the late 30s, very early 40s, and it began to be published during the Second World War, and it was stopped. They censored it, and they refused to continue publishing it because it sort of embodies the effeminate aspects of Japanese society, which they were trying to sort of quash during the war. They were sort of rioting up all these young men, and this book was seen as subversive to that, and it wasn't entirely published until after the war. If you haven't read any Tanizaki, I think this is his best book. A lot of people like In Praise of Shadows, which might be like a shorter, briefer entry into his world, but you can't go wrong with this book. This is a really excellent novel. Next, I've sort of found myself in a little bit of a Walter Kaufman hole. Um, I have quite slowly, been working through the basic writings of Nietzsche. I'm like almost done The Birth of Tragedy. I've been trying to read like a section a day for most of the year, but like really slow. Like I'm not putting any pressure on myself to read this thing. But recently, I've just been able to find more stuff translated by Walter Kaufman, translated and edited by Walter Kaufman here. First is I and Thou, Martin Buber, translated by Walter Kaufman. Buber is this like legendary sort of philosophical religious guy, and this is his most famous book. I don't know too much about what is really explored, like the details of this book, but the basic conceit of the I and Thou, creating this dialogue between yourself and the things that populate the world around you, as opposed to thinking of an object as an it, thinking of it as a thou, thinking of it as a being that has sort of the ability to perceive you just as much as you have the ability to perceive it. I think that's sort of where this book's main idea, and the ramifications of that, I'm not quite sure what they are. I'll have to read the book and find out. And then I also found this Walter Kaufman's Nietzsche. This is like a philosophical study and biography of Nietzsche, which came out, I think, originally in 1950. And it blew my mind because this book has a blurb from Thomas Mann. Where is it? Yeah, there's a blurb from Thomas Mann, which is wild to me. So this is the 4th edition of that. It goes through his biography and the main themes he returns to. I'd really like to get a firm grasp on Nietzsche, but again, like, the name of the game here is just slow. I'm really just like going as slow as possible, trying to absorb what I'm reading. But yeah, it's just it's been interesting to see Kaufman's name appearing again and again in the last couple of weeks, just finding his stuff and gravitating naturally towards his translations. It's pretty cool. The next one I have might be a real gem. This is 300 Tang poems, translated by Ines Herden with illustrations by Chiang Yi. I think that's sort of the relation here. So Tang China, this is like 600 to 900-ish. This is a bilingual book, and it's fully illustrated with these great like glossy pages of these ink drawings. And I think this book might be like a real like valuable volume. It's got a lot of damage, a lot more like damage to it than I would normally want in something that I own. But the illustrations are so beautiful, and it's so valuable to have the translation and the original next to each other like that. I just think this is a really beautiful book, and I really admire the craft here. But I got it. I mean, I found it in Kyoto for like a negligible amount of money. So I thought it would be great to have and explore bit by bit. I'm not intending on learning Chinese. I'm struggling enough with Japanese. So that seems like an endeavor for perhaps another lifetime. But yeah, this is 300 Tang poems, and this is from the Far East Book Company. This is the selected short stories of Cora Sandell, I guess, who's a Norwegian writer, and she was writing in the early mid 20th century. It says here these are collected stories from the 20s to the 40s. So that was when she would have been in her 40s to 60s. And she's just a very important figure in Norwegian literature. So I've been curious to read her stories for a long time, and I found a copy online and just pulled the trigger. Looks like it'll be a nice thing, even though this spine is utterly faded, just completely gone. That's what you get when you trust the descriptions of the booksellers online. Next, I have Notebook of a Return to the Native Land, which is a poem by Aimé Césaire, who is a poet from Martinique, and served as like a president of the Martinique Council and like mayor of Martinique's capital city for a long time. This really important figure there, and his writing of a like colonial Caribbean, like Franco-Caribbean poetry is really like legendary stuff. And so I got this one. This was published, I think, in the 30s, maybe 1939, and it's supposed to be maybe his best poem. It's got an introduction from Andre Breton, who I have mixed feelings on, but certainly I can admire as a curator of interesting and thought-provoking art. It's supposed to be a really great poem, and I'm trying to read more poetry. This writer came up when I was reading The Free World by Louis Menand, so he's involved in a lot of that sort of cultural migration from Europe to America that's happening in the years directly preceding and following the Second World War. Really like influential, important literary figure, and I'm excited to read this book. I have In Youth is Pleasure and I Left My Grandfather's House by Denton Welch. I love Denton Welch, and I've read In Youth is Pleasure before. I read it in the Penguin Classics that they came out with maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but I really love these copies from Exact Change. I have a handful of these Exact Change books, and they're great. They're all this like great like square size with really like nice margins and paper. In Youth and Pleasure is like this very the word I see used to describe it is delicate and mundane. It's a book where not a whole lot happens, like in terms of action, but the prose and the narration makes it so rich despite that. It's incredibly introspective and explorative of the sort of inner mind in a way that many people say is reminiscent of Marcel Proust. Welch was a British writer who published a handful of novels and I think died quite young. Here we have mentions of Proustian memory and nostalgia. I really like Denton Welch. I've read one other novel of his called A Voice Through a Cloud, which has some autobiographical inspiration based on his time spent in hospital. In Youth and Pleasure is also it's a classic, and I don't know about I Left My Grandfather's House, but I think it's like a walking tour type book. I think it's maybe like 100 pages of like a sort of walking in the British countryside. I'm really looking forward to it, and as I said, I just love these Exact Change books. So whenever I see these, I pick them up. They're a really well curated publisher. Speaking of publishers I really admire, I got quite lucky, and I have found 5 books from NYRB, which is it's a treasure trove in Japan. These books, you can't find them out here. You used to be able to get like a couple at like the new bookstores, but they've just been like priced out. I think they're not selling them here because they're too expensive. So anytime I find one, it's very lucky. And I got 5. I found this at a bookstore in Kobe. This is Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, one of these great big Russian epics. Grossman is writing here about the Second World War. I think this is a quite famous novel for its detail and its depth and its sort of fearless representation of that time. I don't get a sense that it's like dark. I don't get a sense that it's like I'm always afraid to read the Gulag Archipelago because it seems like it's just going to like beat me over the head with like really astoundingly horrible things. That's not the sense I get from this. I mean, they're comparing this to Chekhov or Bellow. So I'm curious to get to this. A lot of people have recommended this book to me. And then I found these 4 at the same bookstore. There was like a big stack of NYRB books at this bookstore in Kyoto. they had some that I've already read and some that were too beat up for me to want to buy. So I just got the 4 that were in good shape, and 2 of them I knew and 2 of them I didn't. So the ones I don't know, this is The Rest is Silence by Augusto Monterroso. And it says it's the only novel by this writer from Guatemala. He has a blurb from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. A rollicking metafiction of unreliable reminiscences, references to Groucho Marx. So it should be funny and delightful. I hope. Next is The Frog in the Throat by Marcus Werner. This book takes place in Switzerland, so I'm thinking Werner is like a German language writer, maybe from Switzerland or Austria. A miniature tragicomic masterpiece compared to Dickens. I sit around, I drink, I brood, I pat myself down for flaws and find many, and each evening I say, starting tomorrow, I'm going to get a grip on myself. Wow, relatable. I got Sun City by Tove Jansson recently, over the holidays. I made my way through all of the Moomin books, which was my first time reading those books. The Moomin books published over a series of like 20 years, and they go from being quite silly and cute and charming children's stories to really wonderful explorations of like deep ideas with these still remarkably accessible characters, these characters that are appealing to children, dealing with melancholy, dealing with, saying goodbye to loved ones, dealing with neuroses, dealing with midlife crises. I was reading all those books and I saw this one, Sun City. This is about her experiences in seeing retirement homes in America, and specifically in St. Petersburg, Florida. I think this is a novel based on that experience. Jansson is wonderful, just pure joy to read. And I don't think there's a bad place to start with Jansson. You can get a handful of her books from NYRB. If you can get your hands on the Moomin books, read those. You can read one of those in like a couple of hours, like very, very sweet and fun. And I was very thrilled to find this book and could keep reading more of Jansson's more mature novels. Lastly, I have Sleepless Nights by Elizabeth Hardwick. Hardwick's a writer I've been interested in for a long time, and I've just been circling around and haven't gotten to. But she's in this like class of like big league female authors. She's got blurbs from Susan Sontag and Joan Didion. She's like in that group. She's very, very well, highly regarded. And this is it seems like a mix of fact and fiction, which is another thing I really love. And it's one of the outstanding contributions to American literature of the last 50 years. Well, there you go. I think this is the one of the NYRB books that I am most like directly excited to try. I haven't read any Hardwick, and I want to try something soon. So this one really, really got me excited to find. But that's it. I think that's like 20 books I found over the last couple months, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you so much for watching.